What's up, nerd and nerdettes? It's time for a Superpower Shorty. This superpower is a splinter off the branch of body manipulation and blood manipulation. So sit down and get set for flesh manipulation. With an ability that belongs to all organic life that happens to take the majority of the damage in a fight and being something desired by the creatures of the night, users of Sárkakinesis wield complete control over flesh, the soft substance consisting of muscle and fat that's usually found between the skin and bones of an animal or human. Yeah. This macabre ability allows the user to command the entirety of flesh belonging to an organism or specific specialized tissues belonging to an organism. This includes but is not limited to growing flesh, shaping flesh in whatever twisted way they're presented with, manipulating the density or the weight of flesh in a target, which can then increase or decrease the target's resistance to whatever the user desires. Or they can even go as far as creating constructs out of the biomass to gruesome effect. Most psychological processes in our flesh function below the level of consciousness, so we may be able to control some systems to a certain extent, like, respiratory rate of our lungs or the clench in our bladder when we have to use the bathroom. But we usually aren't able to regulate our blood pressure, heart rate, pupil diameter, hormone production, digestion, and or reflexes by conscious thought alone. And yes, all those parts I name are considered flesh. So obviously when flesh is mentioned, it refers to everything that makes up an organism's physical being. Normally refers to the main pink and bloody part of a body, but you gotta think about what else that entails. Blood, like I mentioned earlier, goes hand in hand with what makes flesh, fleshy. But there's also nerves and veins, the stuff that circulates sensation and various other essential materials throughout the body. There's also the various organs that make up the internal system of any organism. Now, they may all have fancy names and special functions, but if you're getting mauled by an animal or dissected by a mad scientist, they still refer to them as part of your flesh. So in a way, this ability is like body manipulation, where one word is used to describe many parts of the body. But moving on from that, this ability is quite literally the power to manipulate biology and biological life forms, mostly animals, and not so usually plants unless you want to stretch it, and that would be a stretch. While also being referred to as biomancy, biokinesis, flesh warping, flesh crafting, and many others, depending on the setting and the power level of whatever medium you find yourself in. It'll vary in numerous things, one of them being range, whether it's long ranged or if it's a strictly physical contact ability only. Its comprehensiveness, which will bring up the question of whether the flesh manipulator can only affect humans or any living thing. And its scope, whether it's limited to the user's own biology or, like stated earlier, other biologies. Just like the concept, this power is potentially very broad, with its capabilities including but not being limited to a healing factor of some type, someone who can heal minor to serious flesh wounds, a flesh sculptor or surgeon of some type, which is usually portrayed as someone, a doctor, mad scientist, who makes the manipulation of flesh their not-so-legal practice. A shapeshifter, someone who can transform into anything else. A shapeshifter weapon, which is a weapon that is organic in some way and responds to the user's desires. But it doesn't stop there, because there's also the bio-augmented character, simply meaning they went through some kind of bio-experiment of some kind and are now operating on an enhanced physical level, or they have some kind of body horror superpowers. And if a bad guy has this power, then it's usually portrayed as a mind-breaking Lovecraftian eldritch horror superpower. And that's the funny thing about this power. The control of flesh, more often than not, comes from the brain, or I guess the user's personality in most forms of media. So the more sane the individual, the more PG and visually appealing they'll be with how this power is used. Meaning, anything that damages the mind, like the previously mentioned mind-breaking, elder god, fleshy, crappy horror stuff. And on the other side of the scale, those with a loose grip on reality tend to spawn horror-inspired monstrosities from their bio or flesh manipulation. As I've heard numerous times, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they do say creativity and insanity go hand in hand. And I guess that kind of explains why most people think that what an individual looks like on the outside is a direct correlation to how they act on the inside. So, sanity and insanity are very closely linked with this concept, in addition to the other obvious symbolizations like health, virility, and protection. But that's just what I know about flesh. And I also know that in order to stave off this ability's more mental corrupting or physical corrupting effects, it would help you guys to hit that like and subscribe button. It'll also help us get to the good part. So while you're at it, hit that share button so you can share the knowledge with others. And let's just keep on going, see where this rabbit hole takes us. Now, with the power to manipulate the flesh of an individual or being comes the natural ability to manipulate the fluid that transfers the nutrients flesh needs in order to be called, well, flesh, with blood, manipulation, and generation. From there, the user would be able to create their own source of flesh completely separate from outside sources with flesh generation. That one was a little on the nose. The user can combine flesh together and give it a form of durability that it naturally wouldn't have with Sárkakinetic solidification, and then shape the newly solidified flesh into forms both simple and complex via Sárkakinetic constructs. Well, since you can generate, then why shouldn't you be able to take it into your physical form in any manner you choose with flesh absorption? And since you're taking in flesh, well, safely, I hope you should be able to gain a benefit from all that, and if you're lucky, a pretty positive one, with flesh empowerment. If you keep developing this power and pushing it further and further up the power scale, well, then you would be able to control and or grant special qualities onto your flesh with flesh property manipulation. For example, with the previous application, one will be able to increase the mass and solidity of flesh beyond what's capable than if you just solidified it or made it into constructs like you did before, granting enhanced durability and constitution beyond that of previous applications with flesh density manipulation. This ability can and will double as a form of dermal armor. You can't forget to add that. I'm pretty sure you guys will be upset about that. Or they can increase the natural occurring oily and greasy substance found in animal bodies, which more often than not usually exist as a layer under the skin or around certain organs that can insulate against concussive force, with fat generation and manipulation. Or the inverse, they can create a band or bundle of fibrous tissue that correlates with strength via muscle generation and muscle manipulation. And since you're manipulating flesh and you're conveniently made out of flesh, why not kick that up to 11 and create a superpowered flesh-based form that would stereotypically look like a mass of muscle fibers and viscera with flesh mimicry? So now that you're way more fleshy than you were before, why not share some of that biomatter with others in an attempt to patch and repair what was taken away with flesh transfusion? If you're feeling less benevolent with your powers because you see yourself as more important than anybody else, then take that narcissism and use that power to restore your own flesh into a state prior to any damage that was received via flesh regeneration, also known as a regenerative healing fact. The link for that is in the description. So now that you have this level of control over your flesh or the fleshiness of others, forcefully transform an outside target into a flesh-based form on a genetic and molecular level, which then changes the target's original structure from what it was to one of an organic fiber, fat, and blood-based being with flesh transmutation. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, I gotta get some new material. The user can enhance their locomotive capabilities exclusively through the medium of flesh, allowing them to hover or propel themselves through the air under their own power with Sárkakinetic flight. And there you have it, flesh manipulation in a nutshell. While limited, this ability is still a pretty big and important when it comes to dealing with organic organisms. So if it sounds like I left some things out, that's because most of the applications can be found in its parent superpower, body manipulation. This is like a tab in that power's massive folder. So if you want anything you can link this power back to for inspiration, all you gotta remember to do is replace the word body with flesh in certain instances. So check that video out for more inspiration if you want. But to wrap this video up, if you can get more creative and use this ability for more than just punching or smashing or, I guess, regenerating, then you'd be pretty much a force to be reckoned with. So have fun, stay clean, and don't touch me. Seriously, don't touch me.